Hey folks, this is Jake Davis with an On the Fly review for you, and today I'm talking about Studio Sit Sit Sits, released earlier this month, directed by B.J. McDonnell, starring Foo Fighters, Whitney Cummings, Leslie Grossman, Jeff Garland, Jenna Ortega, and Will Forte, and featuring a score from John Carpenter. Now. This film is so great about is it finally answers the age-old question: what do Foo Fighters fight? Well, the Foo Fighters fight Foo, of course, but what is Foo? Well, it turns out Foo is rock and roll worshiping demons in suburban California, and frankly, makes perfect sense. The whole setup here is after nearly 30 years together and working on their 10th album, Dave has hit a severe bit of writer's block. So decides to get experimental and edgy with it, like Zeppelin and Queen back in the day, and they decide to bunker down in a old abandoned mansion in Encino where indie band once butchered each other, Battle Royale style, back in the early 90s, 30 years earlier. And of course, you got it's got a whole Overlook, Sam Raimi, Cabin in the Woods kind of vibe to it. That's really what this movie is. It's what if George A. Romero would have made Help. Before I get into my love here, let me talk about what I didn't like about the movie. Mainly is just the photography. I talked before about how I think good photography, good atmosphere can go a long way with making a more or less mediocre horror movie something more memorable. Get Out, perfect example. But this movie just looked and felt cheap. I loved the gore, but I'm going to get to that. But the photography I didn't like. It didn't feel like our characters were stranded in an abandoned Hollywood mansion. It felt like a bunch of drama at the end of a cul-de-sac, you know what I mean? Everything was just too bright, I guess, is what it really comes down to. To really get that horror movie atmosphere, which you really were trying to get some horror out of this to go along with all the goofiness of it all. The gore. I love the gore. It's sparing. It takes a while to get to it, to get really, really gory, but I really enjoyed the gore, and I gotta pause this, sorry. Yeah, so, love the gore, love the music. Foo Fighters, John Carpenter, great collabo there. I definitely wanted to hear more Foo Fighters songs. We just get, there's a scene where he does a little acoustic riffing for All My Life and Everlong. But, Foo Fighters are the greatest rock and roll band since the last band Dave Grohl was in. And the drummer, Taylor Hawkins, that motherfucker, my big conspiracy theory is that motherfucker digivolves into the wrestler Edge. I'm telling you, it's the same dude. Anyway, I gotta tell you, I think this was great. I loved it. It was silly. The acting was terrible. The production was super cheap, but none of that matters because it's Foo Fighters fighting evil, and I loved it. And when it comes to these kind of movies, like, for example, what was it, 10 years ago, maybe even longer, Your Highness came out, the James Franco and Dave McBride. Everyone hated that. Hated it. I laughed my ass off the whole time watching that movie. I've seen it a couple times since. I mean, it's not as great as, say, Pineapple Express or Up in Smoke, but I do think that this movie here, Studio Sit Sit Sits, is destined to be a stoner classic. 5 stars. Hope y'all enjoyed this video. I'm Jake Davis. I'll catch you on the fly. I want to push stop on my laptop. I'm on the phone. What the fuck?